The sound of crystal clinking against porcelain should have been comforting. It should have been a symbol of family togetherness, the kind that warms a home on a Sunday afternoon. But instead, that sound would become the moment my world collapsed. "Before we eat," Jordan said, standing at the head of the table, "I'd like to say something." It wasn't unusual. My son had inherited his father's poise. He had always been the one to offer the toast on special occasions. We had gathered in the dining room I had kept pristine for decades, where Thomas once carved turkeys and told Dad jokes that made us all groan. The table was set with bone china, my mother's lace runner, and glasses I had polished by hand just that morning. There were 12 of us, close family, a few friends of Jordan's, even Pastor Clarence and his wife. All of them sat in silence as he began. "I've been thinking a lot lately about truth." He continued swirling the wine in his glass. "And loyalty." I smiled softly at first. He had been so reflective since Thomas passed. I thought maybe he was about to speak about his father again, about the values he'd learned from him. I didn't expect what came next. "My dad was a man of integrity," he said. "He gave everything to this family, and he deserved the same in return." I sat a little straighter. Something in his tone shifted, and "I've recently come across evidence," he said slowly, "that suggests not everyone in this family was as faithful to him as he was to us." My hand froze on the napkin I was folding. Alana, his wife, sat beside him, calm, composed. Her eyes never left mine. "Jordan," I said gently, "what are you talking about?" He didn't answer me. Instead, he pulled out a small stack of paper from his blazer pocket. They were yellowed with time creased at the corners. "Handwritten. These are letters," he said. "Found in the attic, buried in an old tin behind a box of outdated tax forms." A few people exchanged glances. Someone coughed. "They're dated during the final year of my father's life," Jordan continued. "And they're addressed to a man named Cal." My heart dropped. I read them all, he said. "They're personal, intimate. They talk about secret meetings, feelings of escape, how he makes you feel alive again." I stared at the papers in his hand. I recognized my handwriting instantly. "But Cal, I didn't know anyone by that name." "They're signed with your name, Mom." My voice caught in my throat. Those aren't what you think." "They're exactly what I think," Alana said, suddenly breaking her silence. "I was the one who found them. I wasn't snooping, Eleanor. I was cleaning. But when I saw them, I couldn't pretend it meant nothing." I looked at her at the cool satisfaction behind her words. She wanted this moment. "I'm not proud of this," Jordan continued, "but I had them authenticated. The ink, the paper, the dates, they check out." The room was quiet, but the air was heavy with judgment. "I wrote a lot during that time," I said carefully. "To myself. To no one. I was grieving before he even died." "You were writing to someone named Cal," Jordan said, repeatedly, romantically. I stood up. "That's not true. I don't know anyone named Cal." "Then how do you explain these?" he demanded. "I can't. I don't remember writing those words." Alana leaned forward, folding her hands like a woman about to deliver a sermon. "You called him your salvation. You said, and I quote, 'If I'd met you before, Thomas, maybe none of this would have happened.'" Gasps rippled through the room. "I was talking about regret," I snapped. "About things I missed in life. That doesn't mean I was cheating on my husband." "Then why hide the letters?" Jordan asked. "I didn't. I never put them in that tin. I don't even remember writing them." "Convenient," Alana whispered. I turned to Jordan. "You've known me your whole life. Do you really believe I would betray your father while he was dying?" He didn't answer. Alana stood. "Jordan and I talked about this," she said. And we've decided it's best if you take some time away. From the house. From us. I felt the blood drain from my face. You're asking me to leave my own home. You can stay in a hotel, she replied calmly. Just until we sort this out. I built this house with Thomas. This is my home. You moved in after he died. You've confused ownership with entitlement. Alana said, her voice sharp now. No one's taking your legacy. We just need space. Jordan, I whispered. Please. You can't believe this. He looked down. I don't know what to believe anymore, he said. Silence. Cold. Clean. Absolute. My knees buckled slightly as I sat down again, my breath coming in short, shallow bursts. No one defended me. No one questioned the letters. No one asked if perhaps this entire moment was wrong. They just sat and judged. I could feel it. All of them weighing my entire life on a scale that had been tampered with. I stared at the letters again. Same paper I used, same ink, same cursive style, but a name I didn't know. A voice that sounded like mine but bent at the edges, twisted just enough. Had someone edited them? Forged part of them? Or worse, copied from something else I'd written long ago? I didn't know yet. But one thing was now certain: this wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a setup, and it was working. As the meal resumed awkwardly, haltingly, I pushed my plate away. I'll leave tonight, I said softly. Jordan didn't respond. Alana raised her wineglass slightly in acknowledgement, then took a sip. From the other end of the table, the pastor's wife murmured something about prayers and the truth always coming to light. I looked at the people I had fed, raised, supported, and realized I was now a guest in my own life. They had turned the story upside down, and unless I could prove otherwise, they would all believe it. But they were wrong, and I was going to prove it, even if it meant digging into a past I hadn't touched in decades, even if it meant fighting alone, even if it meant losing everything first. Now let me ask you this. If your own child believed a lie about you, one planted with forged words and twisted memories, what would you do? Watch until the very end and comment below with the city you're watching from. Before the accusations, before the letters, before the silence, the exile, and the doubt, there was love. So much of it. So real I can still feel it in the walls of this house. It didn't start with Alana. It started with Jordan. Always with him. He was the kind of son you dream of having. Gentle, thoughtful. The kind of boy who held the door for his teachers in elementary school and walked the neighbor's dog in middle school just because she had a bad hip. He loved music. Thomas taught him the trumpet when he was 6. And even when he lost interest in the instrument, he never stopped humming. When he left for college, I cried for a week. Not out of worry, but because I missed the way he filled the house. The thud of his shoes down the stairs. The clink of his cereal spoon every morning. The way he kissed my cheek, even when he was annoyed with me. He wasn't just my son. He was my companion, my anchor after Thomas retired and started to slow down. So when Jordan called during his senior year and said, "Mom, I met someone," my heart swelled. "She's special," he added. "Different." Her name was Alana. He brought her home that Thanksgiving. She stepped into the house, wearing a beige wool coat and a pair of soft leather gloves. She had nervous eyes and beautiful posture. Jordan reached for her hand instinctively as she greeted us. "Mrs. Blake," she said, "it's an honor. Call me Eleanor," I told her with a smile. She brought a pumpkin cheesecake store, bought, but garnished with whipped cream she piped herself. She offered to help in the kitchen and hovered like a hummingbird, eager but unsure. I gave her the easy task, sprinkling pecans on the salad. Thomas raised an eyebrow when she dropped one on the floor and quickly picked it up, cheeks flushed. "She's young," he whispered later, chuckling. "But she's trying." Trying was enough for me. They were engaged by spring. The wedding was set for the following year, and it was one of the happiest seasons of my life. I helped Alana pick the venue. When her parents pushed for a beach ceremony in Florida, she confided that she had always dreamed of a garden wedding, something more elegant than flashy. I made a few calls, pulled a few favors. My friend Lorna had a brother with a country estate, an hour out of town, manicured grounds, ivy-covered trellises, and a small glass house perfect for the cocktail hour. She cried when she saw it. "This is more than I could have imagined," she whispered. "Thank you." During the months that followed, we became close. She started texting me recipes, sending me memes, asking me what Jordan's favorite meals were. I gave her my lemon chicken recipe, he'd loved it since he was 12, and showed her how to fold towels the way I liked them. Once in early summer, I caught her sitting on the back porch, feet up, reading one of my gardening books. "I like peonies," she said. "They remind me of my grandmother." The next morning, I drove to the nursery and bought 3 peony bushes. I planted them myself, despite my knees hurting in the bed, right under the kitchen window. They bloomed like wild the next spring. I even gave her one of my scarves on the day of the rehearsal dinner, a silk square with cornflower blue petals. Thomas had given it to me on our 10th anniversary. It wasn't extravagant, but it meant something. I told her it would look good with her earrings. She wore it the whole night. She called me Mom then. I remember thinking I really have a daughter now. The wedding came and went in a whirlwind. Thomas gave the toast of a lifetime, funny, heartfelt, perfectly paced. I watched Jordan tear up as he danced with me. Alana kissed my cheek and said, "Thank you for raising him right." And I meant it when I replied, "Thank you for loving him." After the wedding, they moved into a small apartment downtown. Jordan was working long hours at the firm. Alana was finishing her MBA. I made casseroles and sent them in freezer-safe containers. I left voice messages when they forgot to call. I offered to help with laundry when she complained the dryers at their building were always breaking down. 6 months later, they moved into our house. Thomas was slowing down. His memory had started to fray around the edges. He'd forget his keys' repeat stories. Nothing alarming yet, but enough for Jordan to suggest they come stay for a while to be close to help out. I agreed. I didn't want to admit how much I needed it. Watching Thomas drift day by day was like watching a lighthouse fade in fog. You knew it was there, but less and less of it reached you. Alana stepped up. She cooked dinners when I couldn't think straight. She picked up prescriptions when I forgot. She sat with Thomas and asked him about the old days, even if he repeated the same anecdotes again and again. She handled it with grace. I watched her with awe. I truly believed I had been blessed with a daughter-in-law who understood compassion. One day, I found her in the study. She was going through our old albums, her fingers brushing over the photos of our honeymoon in Venice. "You and Thomas looked so in love," she said. "We were," I replied. "We still are." And she nodded, not patronizingly, but as if she believed me. She started calling me more often when I wasn't around, asking if I needed anything, reminding me to drink more water. Little things, but meaningful. That winter, I slipped on ice near the mailbox and sprained my wrist. It wasn't serious, but Alana insisted I stay in bed the next day. She brought me tea propped up my pillows, turned on the electric blanket, and even read to me from one of Thomas's old gardening journals. "I know nothing about perennials," she said with a laugh, "but you make them sound magical." It was the first time I laughed in weeks. When Thomas's condition worsened, when the confusion turned into full cognitive decline, it was Alana who held my hand during the appointments. It was Alana who helped me organize his medications, who kept track of the paperwork, who calmed me down When I found him standing in the hallway at 3 in the morning, asking where his mother was, she never raised her voice, never rolled her eyes, never complained. She was in every sense of the word a daughter to me. In the last weeks of Thomas's life, she helped me organize a small anniversary dinner. 28 years. She made the centerpiece. She printed photos of us and put them in a slideshow that played on the TV during dessert. Thomas smiled more that night than he had in months. After he went to bed, she hugged me. Not a quick squeeze. A long, real grounding hug. "Thank you for trusting me," she whispered. And I did. Completely. If anyone had told me then that she would one day turn on me, convince my son that I had betrayed the very man whose picture she'd printed and framed, I would have laughed. I would have said, not Alana, because back then she didn't feel like a daughter-in-law. She felt like family. She felt like a second chance. And I gave her everything. My trust, my history, my home. I gave her the keys to the parts of me no one had ever been inside. And that perhaps is why it cut so deeply when she took those keys and used them to build a case against me. But that moment had not come yet. Not in the days of warm tea, soft scarves, blooming peonies, and shared memories. Not in the days when we sat side by side in silence, and silence didn't feel like a weapon. Back then, we were still a family. Back then, I still believed she loved me too. I don't remember the moment it changed, only that it didn't happen all at once. There was no yelling, no dramatic betrayal, no slammed doors or tearful confessions. What changed first was the space, the air, the silence between words. It started with names. She stopped calling me Mom. At first, I thought I was imagining it. For months, she had called me that cheerfully, casually in passing. "Mum? Do you want coffee, Mum? Where's the dish towel? Mum, I found this book you'd love." But then it became Eleanor. Polite, distant, sharp around the edges. She said it with an extra syllable like it was foreign in her mouth. Formal, chosen. I noticed it in the kitchen first. One morning, she walked in while I was whisking eggs and said, "Eleanor, we're out of oat milk." Not accusing, just matter of fact. But not warm either. She said it again, later that day when we were folding laundry. "Eleanor, did you see the utility bill?" Each time she said my name, it pushed me a little farther outside the circle. And the circle got smaller every week. I told myself not to overthink it. Grief made people act strangely. The first year after Thomas passed was hard on all of us. Jordan was trying to be strong for both of us. Alana was still adjusting to living in someone else's home. Maybe she was just trying to assert some boundaries, but the boundaries kept expanding. The second sign came in the kitchen. Alana always said she wasn't much of a cook, and I had enjoyed being the one who kept us fed. But slowly, things began to disappear. My cast-iron skillet vanished one day. When I asked about it, she said it was too old and greasy. I tossed it. I got a new non-stick one. She had thrown away my skillet. The same one Thomas bought me for our anniversary. The one I'd seasoned over 2 decades. Gone. "It had history," I said quietly. "It had rust," she replied. I checked the pantry later that day and found that all my dry goods had been rearranged. My herbal teas were gone, replaced by matcha packets and green smoothies. The sugar canister I had used for years had been replaced by a glass jar labelled organic cane crystals in blocky vinyl print. I went to make coffee the next morning and found that my drip machine had been unplugged boxed and replaced with a French press and a milk frother. "French press is healthier," she said when I asked. Healthier, maybe. But it wasn't mine. She started changing more than the kitchen. Jordan's schedule became increasingly mysterious. He left earlier for work, came home later. When he was home, he was often in the den with headphones on or out for a walk with Alana. We still had dinner together occasionally, but even that shifted. She began hosting just the two of us nights, date nights. She said they needed to stay grounded. I agreed. Every marriage needs privacy. But one Tuesday evening, I made pot roast Jordan's favorite, and I set the table like always. The meal sat untouched for hours. When I texted him, there was no reply. Finally, at nearly 9 p.m., Alana walked in alone carrying a paper bag and the scent of takeout. "We got Thai," she said. Jordan had a rough day. He needed something different. I looked at the untouched roast already going cold. "I made dinner." She shrugged. "You didn't say anything about plans?" "I always cook Tuesdays." I didn't know it was a rule. She disappeared down the hall before I could say more. The next day, my calendar had been taken off the fridge. In its place was a sleek, dry erase board with a rotating schedule: meals, workouts, bills, lawn care. There were designated quiet times, Jordan's productivity windows, and even color-coded chores. My name wasn't on it. I laughed at first. Then I cried. The laughter was hope. The tears were grief. But I still said nothing. I still told myself she's just trying to help. Then came the passwords. One afternoon, I went to check the household budget. We had always kept a joint document, Jordan, Alana, and me, just to stay organized. When I clicked the link on my computer, it said, "Access denied." I tried again. Same result. When I asked Alana, she smiled. "We've transitioned to a new app. More secure." "Don't worry, we've got it covered." "I'd like to be included," I said. "You wouldn't enjoy the platform," she replied. "It's a bit complicated well, it's optimized for professionals." Professionals, as if I hadn't balanced a household budget for 35 years. As if I hadn't helped my husband refinance the mortgage. As if my retirement contributions were somehow irrelevant now. I asked Jordan about it later that night. "I think it's best to let her manage it," he said. "You've got enough on your plate." He kissed my forehead and went to bed. The conversation ended there. But the exclusion did not. I lost access to our Amazon account. I was removed from the home thermostat app. The code for the garage door changed. The password for our streaming services was updated. Updated meant erased. They began receiving mail under a trust account I'd never heard of. When I asked Jordan, he told me Alana was optimizing the family assets for tax efficiency. "I thought we were open about finances," I said. He hesitated. "We are. But you've got to let us take the lead now. Let us. Not let me, not include me. Let us." I started to wonder when I'd become a tenant in my own home. Then came the garden. I'd spent years nurturing it, planting tulips and dahlias and irises that bloomed in perfect sequence across the seasons. Thomas and I had designed it together, and it had become my sanctuary. One day I came home from the grocery store and found that the back hedge had been uprooted, the stone path replaced with gravel, and my peony bushes, 3 of them planted for Alana, had been dug up and replaced with sculptural shrubs. When I confronted her, she smiled. "The new layout is more minimalist, better for resale value." "Resale, just long-term thinking," she said breezily. My hands shook. "I never agreed to that. It's a shared space." "No," I said louder now. "It's my home." Alana didn't flinch. "It was your home. But now we're building something new." And with that, she walked away. I sat on the bench where the peonies used to bloom and tried to breathe. It was happening slowly, not with fists, not with violence, but with plans, control, redirection. She wasn't attacking me. She was replacing me. Jordan didn't see it, or didn't want to. I tried once more to talk to him, this time about the peonies. I thought maybe that would reach him. He had helped me plant them. He'd picked them for Alana. "They were just flowers," he said. "No," I replied. They were the only things she ever told me, reminded her of home. He frowned. Mom, you're reading too much into things. I'm losing my place in this family. That's not true. Then why am I being pushed out of everything? He sighed. Because you can't let go. You hold on too tightly to everything. The calendar, the passwords, the meals, the past. Maybe it's time to trust us. I looked at him and realized something terrifying. He didn't know he was repeating her words, word for word. She had been rewriting not just the routines, but the narrative. And he believed it. I didn't say anything after that. I didn't want to sound bitter. But at night, I started to write again. To myself. Letters, notes, journals. Not for anyone else. Just to hold on to something. Just to remind myself that I was still here. Still watching. Still present. Because if I didn't write it down, I feared I would start to forget who I was. What was mine. What was true. But I never expected those writings would one day be used against me. Twisted. Altered. Weaponized. That came later. For now, I was still in the quiet stage. The subtle stage. Where love is replaced by politeness. Where inclusion is replaced by delegation. Where presence is replaced by permission. And I didn't know yet how far it would go. But the cracks had begun. The fractures in our foundation were growing. And eventually, everything would collapse. The erosion wasn't sudden. It was 1,000 small moments, each one trivial on its own, easy to overlook, easier to forgive. But like drops of water wearing down stone, they were persistent, precise, unrelenting. By the time I realized what was happening, I was already buried under the weight of being treated like a burden. It began with the birthday. Not mine, Jordan's. I had always made his cake. Every year since he was 5, it was the same lemon chiffon with raspberry filling, just like his grandfather used to request. When he was little, I'd decorate it with plastic dinosaurs. As an adult, he'd ask for a minimalist glaze, maybe some candied lemon on top. That year, I spent hours preparing it. The batter, the delicate folding of egg whites, the cooling process, the frosting made from scratch. It was ready by 11 a.m., set gently in its domed glass case on the dining table. At 4 p.m., Alana came home with a store-bought chocolate cake. 3 layers, gold foil trim. His name written in script with dark chocolate curls. I figured I'd surprise him, she said. Something new. He's always polite about your lemon thing, but I think he's been craving variety. I looked at the cake I had made, then at hers, then at her. Jordan never mentioned wanting something new. That night, during the singing, she lit candles on the chocolate cake. Mine was left untouched in the corner. When I asked if anyone wanted a slice, Alana said, "Let's save it for later. We have enough sugar on the table already." No one touched it. The next morning, I found it in the trash. Still covered, untouched. My name was also missing from the thank you cards she later mailed out. That was the first time I cried in the pantry. The next injustice came wrapped in subtlety. It was the wedding of Jordan's colleague, a destination event in Charleston. Everyone was invited, Jordan, Alana, even some extended family. I assumed I would go too. I had helped plan Jordan's wardrobe, picked up his tailored suit, even polished his shoes. Then one night, while passing the guest room, I saw their luggage packed. My name wasn't on the itinerary taped to the door. I knocked and asked about my flight details. Alana paused. "We didn't think you'd want to travel that far. The flight is long." "I'm fine flying." "Right, but there's no elevator at the Airbnb. It's a 3-story townhouse, lots of stairs. We didn't want you to be uncomfortable." I looked at Jordan. He avoided my eyes. "You're leaving me behind. We're just trying to be practical." "I'm not old," I said louder than I meant to. No one argued. They just walked away. 3 days later, they left without me. I stayed behind and watered the flowers. The worst of it was not the exclusion itself. It was that Jordan never noticed how much it hurt me. I didn't even get a souvenir. Then came the medication switch. One morning, I noticed my pill organizer had been tampered with. The slots were rearranged. Some pills were missing. When I confronted Alana, she told me she had streamlined my supplements. I consulted a pharmacist, she said. Half of what you were taking was unnecessary. You went through my prescriptions. I was trying to help. You don't have the right. She tilted her head. Someone has to make executive decisions. You've been forgetful lately. That word. Forgetful. It stuck to me like mold. I remembered every injustice after that. The grocery lists she started writing without asking me. The recipes she removed from the kitchen binder. The book club she started hosting in the living room without inviting me, even though they used books from my shelves. One evening, I came home from a walk to find my armchair had been moved into the garage. When I asked why, Alana said we're redecorating. That chair clashed with the new aesthetic. Thomas had built that chair with his hands. It was the first thing he made after retiring. I moved it back. The next morning, it was gone again. Replaced with a sleek leather lounge I couldn't sit in without sliding sideways. I told Jordan. She just wants to modernize, he said. You have to stop taking everything so personally. I wanted to scream, but instead I nodded. The next week, Alana rearranged the photos on the staircase. She kept all the ones of Jordan and her, and removed half of the ones with Thomas and me. When I asked where they were, she said they're in the guest room. Less visual clutter in the hallway. Visual clutter. That was what my marriage had become. I noticed that when guests came over, Alana introduced me as Jordan's mother instead of my mother-in-law. She stopped inviting me to dinner with her friends. She stopped offering me coffee. Then came the financial shift. I received a call from my bank asking if I had authorized a new joint account. I didn't, I said. Turns out Alana had added Jordan to my old savings account, one I had opened decades ago before I was even married. I thought it made sense, she said when I confronted her. In case anything happens to you. In case, she shrugged. Jordan's your only child. He'll inherit everything anyway. I felt the room spin. I had helped Thomas build our estate from nothing. Paid off a mortgage, managed insurance, balanced bills. But now I was being managed like a liability, a legal formality. I changed the account access that afternoon. The next day, the password no longer worked. When I asked Jordan, he said he trusted Alana to handle it. She's efficient, he said. We've streamlined everything. I was no longer part of we. Later that month, my phone contract was moved to their family plan. I was told, not asked, that they'd take care of the billing now. My voicemail message was changed. My email password was reset. I called the provider. This account is now under the household administrator's control, they said. The household administrator. That wasn't me anymore. I began to feel small, not like an elder, not like a matriarch, like an intruder. I would walk into rooms and they'd go silent. I would start stories, and Alana would cut me off with, "Oh, Eleanor's just being nostalgic again." When I forgot my keys one afternoon, she smiled and said, "Maybe we should get you a lanyard." That night, I heard her on the phone with a friend. "She's sweet," Alana said, "but fading. It's like she's half here sometimes." I stood outside the door, breath caught in my throat. I wasn't fading. I was drowning, in plain sight. Then came the final straw. My bedroom was moved. I came home from a church brunch to find all my belongings had been relocated to the guest room. My closet was empty. My dresser was gone. My books were stacked in boxes in the hall. "We turned your old room into a wellness studio," Alana explained. "It'll be great for yoga and meditation. You'll love the guest room, it gets more light." I didn't agree to this. "You were out," she said breezily. We figured it was as good a time as any. She didn't even apologize. Neither did Jordan. That night, I unpacked my books in silence. The new room smelled of dust and cedar. The mattress was too firm. The window latch was broken, and the door had no lock. The next morning, Alana knocked once and entered without waiting. Just checking, she said. You slept okay? I said nothing. I wanted to scream again, but screaming wouldn't matter. Not when you're no longer considered part of the household. Not when your voice is treated like background noise. So I smiled, quiet, cold, and I began to plan. Because by then, I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was an agenda, and I had just reached the end of my patience. There's something cruel about silence when it follows a storm. Not the peaceful kind of silence, but the hollow, unnatural quiet that comes after too many words have already been said. It was that kind of silence that settled over the house. I didn't speak to Alana unless I had to. Jordan barely made eye contact, and I moved through the halls as if I were walking in someone else's home. But I kept writing. Late at night when I couldn't sleep, I'd sit at the desk in the guest room and scribble in my notebooks. Journals, reflections, letters to Thomas. Pages and pages of memories, grief and unfinished thoughts. My handwriting had grown looser over the years, but it was still mine. And that's what terrified me most, because the letters Jordan confronted me with those were written in my hand. I knew the paper. I recognized the words, but I didn't remember writing them. And I had never written to anyone named Cal. That mystery festered in me. Who was Callie? Was he someone real, or was he an invention? One afternoon, about a week after the bedroom incident, I walked into the kitchen to make tea. Alana had left her laptop open on the counter, the screen glowing with a document. She must have stepped out to take a call because her phone was still on the table, unlocked screen, dim. I hesitated. I had never gone through her things. I had respected her privacy even when she didn't respect mine. But something in me, something desperate, pushed me forward. I glanced at the screen. The file was titled Personal Narrative, Final Edits, DIL version. I froze. Dear daughter-in-law. I moved closer. The document was several pages long. At first glance, it looked like a creative writing project, some kind of memoir piece. But the voice it was written from my point of view. I began to read. I remember the way Cal used to hold my hand lightly, never possessively. Not like Thomas. Not like the man everyone thought I loved. I blinked. The sentence made me nauseous. I loved Cal with the kind of love that shames a woman. A love so hidden, so selfish, that it remained locked in letters I never meant to send. My chest tightened. This was fiction. A monologue. Written in my voice. I scrolled through paragraph after paragraph of fabricated emotion, invented memories lines I had never written in my life. But I recognized some of the phrases. Bits and pieces. I remembered writing about grief, about feeling invisible, about the loneliness of caregiving. But I had never tied those feelings to another man. Alana hadn't forged the letters from scratch. She had built them from fragments. Taken my journals, rewritten my words, Frankensteined my memories into a confession I had never made. She didn't create a lie. She constructed a believable one, because it came from pieces of truth. I was shaking. I backed away from the laptop, just as the back door opened, and Alana stepped in, humming. She saw me. For a moment, we both stood still. Then she smiled. "Did you need something?" she asked. I forced a breath. No, I was just waiting for the kettle. She walked over and closed the laptop with 2 fingers. Not rushed, just quiet, controlled. "You look pale," she said. "I'm fine. You should rest. I know all of this has been a lot." I nodded. My voice wouldn't come. She poured herself sparkling water and left the room. I stared at the closed laptop. Then, without another word, I turned off the kettle and walked to the garage. I opened the last moving box labeled Misc Writing, 2007-2014. Inside, I found my journals. Spiral-bound, soft-covered, mismatched. I opened one at random. Page after page of my handwriting. Raw thoughts, grief, memory, regret. None of it was shameful. None of it was what Alana had presented. But I could see how it could be used, taken out of context, twisted, recut. I flipped to the back. Several pages were missing, torn out, cleanly. My hands trembled. I picked up the next journal. Then the next. Always in the back. The last few pages gone. That's how she did it. That's how she made it real. She hadn't forged my hand. She had stolen it. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in bed with my lamp on, all my journals spread out like a crime scene. I flipped through every volume, tracked every phrase I recognized from the letters Jordan had quoted. Piece by piece, I reconstructed what she had done. She had taken my private writing cut and edited and rearranged them and written her own version of events. A version where I had fallen in love with a man named Cal, while Thomas lay dying. It was fiction, but she had passed it off as reality. I thought about confronting Jordan, marching into his room, demanding he listen. But I knew how that would go. She would deny it. The document would be gone. The journals would be incomplete. And Jordan, he would look at me the same way he had looked at me during the birthday toast. Hurt, lost, ashamed. I needed proof, real proof, not just a feeling, not just a gut instinct. Because Alana didn't make mistakes. She left nothing behind, except maybe something she hadn't meant to. I went to the trash. The bin in the study was full. Jordan had been printing court transcripts for a work case. Alana had been drafting something for her marketing class. I reached into the bag and pulled out the papers. Most were irrelevant, but then I found a single printed page, half crumpled. On it was a block of text written in my handwriting, scanned, printed. My exact phrasing from a 2017 journal. But at the top of the page were the words, voice sample draft, narration, miel POV, narration, sample. I turned the paper over. On the back was a sticky note. Don't use this version, too obvious. Blend W grief entry from April 2019. It was her handwriting. I sat down slowly. The truth was undeniable now. Alana had used my own writing to frame me. She had turned my private mourning into a false confession, and Jordan had believed her. Because it looked and sounded like me. But it wasn't. It never was. I held the paper in my hand and felt something shift inside me. The sorrow that had lived in my chest for months, maybe years, hardened into something else. Resolve. I had spent too long being erased, questioned, pushed aside. But not anymore. I slipped the paper into a file folder, slid it under the lining of my suitcase, and zipped it closed. The next morning, I would begin making calls. To an old friend who still worked in legal administration, to a notary who owed me a favor, to someone who could verify authorship software metadata, because the game had changed. And if Alana wanted war, she had just declared it. When I first met Jordan Blake, I didn't see a man. I saw a future. We met at a networking mixer, one of those glossy rooftop events, with craft cocktails and branded napkins. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't even trying. That's what drew me to him. He stood with his drink in one hand, listening more than he spoke. Every time he asked someone a question, they leaned in. He didn't dominate the room. He centered it. I didn't grow up around men like that. Where I came from, you had to elbow your way into every opportunity. My mother raised me and my two brothers alone. My father left when I was 6, and the only legacy he left was unpaid bills and a bitter lesson: if you don't control the story, someone else will. Jordan was everything I never had: soft-spoken, generous, self-assured. But there was something else. He was golden, a son of legacy. The kind of man whose childhood photos hung framed in symmetrical rows down the staircase of a paid-off home. The kind of man who carried a last name people recognized. The first time he brought me to his mother's house, I smiled too hard, laughed too loud, overcompensated at every turn. I wanted Eleanor to like me, not because I needed her approval, but because I understood what she represented. She wasn't just his mother. She was the gatekeeper to his world. She had curated every inch of their home: the monogrammed napkins, the homegrown herbs, the vintage clock that chimed at 5 p.m. sharp. Even the way she said my name, Alana, with that polished crispness, it reminded me that I was a guest, no matter how welcomed I was. Still, she was kind, in her way. She offered me her scarf once when I forgot my jacket. She taught me how to make her lemon chicken. She smiled at me in photos, but even then I could feel the structure, the hierarchy. I wasn't marrying Jordan. I was being inducted into a dynasty. At first I didn't mind. I tried to play the part. During our engagement, I deferred to her on almost everything: flowers, table settings, even the venue. She'd booked it before I'd had the chance to speak. "I just knew this was what you wanted," she'd said. I nodded. I always nodded. That's how you stay in the circle. The cracks began after the wedding. When we moved in temporarily, we thought it became clear this wasn't a transition. This was assimilation. Every room had a memory I wasn't part of. Every drawer I opened, every cabinet I reached into, had been set a certain way, and any change was a disturbance. I once replaced the sugar jar with a labeled container, just to make it easier to track ingredients. She changed it back the next day, without a word. She was never cruel, but she was immovable. Jordan never saw it. He loved her too much. He assumed every suggestion she made came from love. And maybe it did. But love with conditions is still control. When Thomas got sick, everything sharpened. Suddenly, the house was frozen in grief, and I became the helper, the extra pair of hands, the woman behind the scenes. Eleanor praised me, yes, but only for being useful. Thank you for organizing the meds. Thank you for sitting with him while I got groceries. Thank you for being there. Always behind the sentence was the quiet message: "This is my family. You're doing well to support it." I wanted to scream sometimes, but instead I baked. I gardened. I made lists. I told myself, "You're doing this for Jordan, for the man who loves you." Then Thomas passed, and the grief swallowed everything. I gave Eleanor space, but she didn't notice how much space she took up in return. She reorganized the whole house around her mourning. The dining room became a photo gallery. The den became a shrine. The calendar was filled with remembrance dinners, memorial lectures, scheduled prayer circles. I couldn't breathe. I started keeping a notebook of my own. Just small entries, reflections, frustrations. I wrote about feeling invisible. I wrote about wanting something that was mine. I wrote about watching Jordan slip further into her orbit and realizing I was the guest again. Always the guest. I found Eleanor's journals by accident. She had left them in a storage bin in the garage labeled "Old Files." I was looking for holiday decorations. I opened one. At first I felt guilty, but curiosity won. Her entries were so raw, so vulnerable. She wrote about missing Thomas, about feeling unseen, about regrets, about imagining a different life with different love. It was human, and it was powerful. And that's when the idea took hold. What if the power she had over the family could be reversed? What if the story shifted? What if I became the one who could guide Jordan, not her? I didn't forge anything. I didn't make up lies. I took what was already written and framed it. She had written about missing someone unnamed. I gave him a name, Cal. She had written about guilt. I connected it to betrayal. She had written about love. I redirected it. The letters I gave Jordan weren't fake. They were reframed. Narrative is everything. She used hers for sympathy. I used hers for revelation. Was it cruel? Maybe. But when you've lived in someone else's house, in someone else's shadow for long enough, you learn that the only way to be heard is to speak their language. Jordan believed me, because deep down he had already begun to question her. He had seen the control, the manipulation, the soft tyranny of tradition. I just gave him the proof he needed to sever the tie. And for the first time, the house felt like mine. The kitchen, the calendar, the decision-making. I didn't do it for power. I did it for peace. But peace, I've learned, is fragile. And I think she knows what I did now. I see it in the way she watches me. Quiet, calculating, like she's gathering facts, like she's waiting. But I'm not afraid, because the best lies aren't the ones you tell. They're the ones people convince themselves to believe. And she's done enough convincing for a lifetime. I had almost convinced myself that I was alone, that I would have to uncover everything without help, that no one would believe me. And then he knocked on my door. It was late afternoon. The sky was grey, and I was sorting through a folder of bank records I'd requested under the guise of reviewing my retirement accounts. I had started making notes, timestamps, metadata, small inconsistencies. Things no one would care about unless they knew what to look for. When I opened the door, I didn't recognize the man standing on the porch at first. Tall, sharp features, pepper grey hair, worn leather jacket. He held a manila envelope under one arm. "Mrs. Blake?" he asked. "Yes. I'm Sam Whitaker. I worked with your husband. I was his estate planning consultant." I blinked. "Thomas never mentioned you," I said cautiously. "He wouldn't have. We only met a few times, but I helped draft the addendum to his will, the one he requested 6 months before he passed." I felt my heart skip. "I've been trying to get in touch with your son," he continued, but I received no response, so I thought I'd stop by. "Come in," I said quickly, "please." We sat in the parlor. I offered him tea, which he declined. "I know this is sudden," he said, "but Thomas made a change to his estate, one that affects the deed to this house." My breath caught. "What kind of change?" "He designated you as sole proprietor and included language preventing any third-party management or occupancy without your explicit consent. The clause is buried legal jargon, but it's airtight." He handed me a copy. I skimmed the document. It was real, signed, notarized. "Why now?" I asked. "I saw the property listed under a management trust in your son's name. That violates the clause." I stared at him. "Did Thomas ever tell you why he wanted that clause?" He nodded. "He said he trusted you, but was worried others might try to take charge after he was gone." I bit back tears. I had been told I was paranoid. Turns out Thomas had seen it coming too. Then Sam hesitated. "There's one more thing." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a flash drive. "I don't know what's on here," he said, but it was sealed in the original documents, labeled "To Eleanor Only." I took it with trembling hands. He stood. "If you need legal backing, I still consult privately. No charge for Thomas's family." "Thank you," I said. He nodded, then left. I locked the door behind him, then rushed to the guest room and plugged the drive into my laptop. Inside was a single file. Eleanor Journal Entry.wev. An audio recording? I clicked play. My own voice filled the room. "I don't know why I'm recording this," it began. "Maybe because some things are too dangerous to write down. Maybe because I can't trust paper anymore." It was my voice, my words. but I had no memory of recording it. Then I remembered. Thomas had given me a digital recorder after one of our counseling sessions. He said, "When your thoughts move too fast to write, speak them." The file continued. "I've been journaling for years. It helps. But lately I've noticed things missing. Pages torn, ideas twisted. It sounds crazy, but I think someone's been reading them. Someone with an agenda." I paused the recording. This was it. The proof I didn't know I'd left myself. Time-stamped, digitally recorded, authentic. I printed the file's metadata. The date was 3 weeks before Thomas passed. 3 weeks before Alana found the letters. I began assembling a folder, one for Jordan. Not now, not yet. I needed more. So I called Ruth. She was Thomas's former secretary, now retired, and still sharp as a whip. She picked up after the second ring. "Eleanor," she said, surprised. "Is everything all right?" "I need a favor," I said. An hour later, we met at a quiet cafe across town. I told her everything. She didn't blink. I knew something wasn't right when Alana emailed me about updating the property taxes. She used your name, but CC'd herself as owner representative. I didn't respond. "Can you prove it?" I printed the email. Old habits die hard. She handed it over. Another puzzle piece. That week I worked quietly. I reviewed the scanner history on our home printer, found partial scans of my journals cropped to remove dates. I printed every entry. I visited the public library and had the scanned letters compared against the originals in my journals. Linguistic experts called this forensic linguistics. I called it survival. The more I compiled, the clearer the pattern became. What had seemed like subtle mistreatment wasn't random. It was curated. The timing of my moved bedroom, 2 days after I questioned the finances. The peonies. Removed the week Jordan added Alana as co-owner of my account. The control wasn't incidental. It was strategic. Still, I had to be careful, because Alana had begun to notice. She started asking questions. "Where did you go today? Who were you calling? Why are you always writing?" She began entering my room without knocking again. I kept the real files at Ruth's house. One night, I found my desk drawer open. Another night, my laptop had been unplugged. She was watching, but she didn't know everything. She didn't know about the audio file. She didn't know about the deed. She didn't know about the old printer cache archived on the network, or the receipts I found in the trash ink refills billed to an editing service, one that specialized in narrative memoir assembly. She had outsourced the construction of the letters, used my voice, my pain, turned them into fiction. I created a final file, a printed tabbed binder, labeled Evidence. Fraudulent misrepresentation, J. Blake Estate. I slid it into a fireproof case. Then I made a copy. One went to Ruth, one stayed with me, and one I planned to deliver to someone else. Not Jordan. Not yet. But someone who could protect the truth until it was ready to come out. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about rewriting the story they thought they knew. And I had just finished the first draft. The invitation was Alana's idea, or at least that's what the card said. "You are cordially invited to a family appreciation brunch, honoring the legacy of Thomas Blake. Sunday, 11th, 0 a.m., hosted by Jordan and Alana Blake." The words were printed in deep navy over white linen cardstock. The irony was hard to miss. She had spent 2 years dismantling everything Thomas built, and now she wanted to honor his legacy. Still, I RSVP'd. I dressed carefully that morning. A cream blouse with mother-of-pearl buttons. Thomas's favorite pendant. The sapphire one he gave me when Jordan was born. I tied a silk scarf around my neck, the one Alana once borrowed and never returned. I had taken it back, not out of pettiness, but out of principle. The room was already half full when I arrived. A private event hall. Pale walls, gold chairs. Jazz music played softly in the background. A projection screen displayed a slideshow of old family photos. There were images of Jordan as a boy of Thomas in his army uniform of holidays and vacations. I wasn't in many of them. Alana greeted me near the podium. She wore a navy sheath dress heels too high for sincerity and a smile stretched tight. "Eleanor," she said, "I'm so glad you made it." "I wouldn't miss it," I replied. She gave me the smile of a woman who believes she's already won. Jordan was standing near the refreshment table. His tie was crooked. He looked tired. I approached him, but before I could speak, Alana tapped a glass. "Everyone, if I could have your attention." Chairs shifted, voices dropped. She stepped up to the podium, her hand resting lightly on its edge. "We're gathered today to remember a man who shaped us all," she began. Thomas Blake was a father, a husband, a friend, and a mentor. His presence, though missed, continues to guide this family. She gestured toward the slideshow. As his daughter-in-law, I had the honor of learning from him. And it's that example that inspires us to continue building something meaningful in his name. She spoke for 5 more minutes, empty words dressed in sincerity, polished lies, scripted affection. When she finished, she turned to Jordan. "Would you like to say something?" she asked. He hesitated, then nodded. He stepped up, slowly cleared his throat, and began. "My father taught me that integrity wasn't something you had, it was something you proved. Every day. In every choice." I felt my heart break a little. He believed in honesty, in clarity. And that's why I struggle even now to reconcile what I've learned in the last year. About the people we trust. About the stories we tell. His voice faltered. And that's when I stood. "May I say something?" I asked. All eyes turned. Alana blinked. Jordan looked unsure, but he nodded. I walked slowly to the front. My heels echoed on the polished floor. I turned to the audience. "Some of you know me as Eleanor. Some of you as Thomas's wife, Jordan's mother. For the last year you've heard whispers, some of them spoken directly, some passed around like party favors." I looked at Alana, and I've remained silent. She stiffened but kept her smile. Because I believed wrongly that silence was dignified. That silence meant rising above. I took a breath. But silence is dangerous. It allows lies to root, to grow, to become truths in the minds of those who don't know better. I reached into my bag and pulled out the binder. The room stilled. "This," I said, "is the truth." I opened it. "These are scans of the journals I've kept for decades. Some of the pages were stolen, torn out, rearranged, taken out of context." I flipped to the next tab. "These are emails. One of them from a narrative consultant, paid to compile personal writing into an emotional confession." I flipped again. "This is a voice recording, dated and time-stamped. My own voice, warning myself that someone had been tampering with my words." Gasps rippled through the crowd. I turned to Jordan. "I never cheated on your father?" His face went pale. "I never wrote letters to a man named Cal. I wrote about grief, about exhaustion, about a life I loved and missed, and didn't know how to survive without." He opened his mouth, but no sound came. I turned to Alana. "I know what you did." She stepped back. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said softly. "Yes," I replied. "You do." I pulled one last sheet from the folder, a payment receipt, from her joint account, to the editing service, dated 2 weeks before the discovery of the letters. I handed it to Jordan. He read it slowly, then again. Alana tried to speak. "I did it for you," she said, voice trembling. "She was controlling you, controlling everything. I was suffocating." Jordan looked at her, really looked at her. "And so you lied," he whispered. "No," she snapped. I reframed. "I gave you perspective." I spoke again. "I loved you, Alana. I trusted you. I gave you a home, a family, and you made me into a villain because you couldn't stand not being at the center. The room was silent. I turned back to Jordan. I'm not asking for forgiveness, I said, because I didn't betray you. But I do want you to know I never stopped being your mother. Not for 1 second. Tears welled in his eyes. He stepped back from Alana, and in that moment she understood. The room had turned. The story had changed. I walked away from the podium. The applause was quiet at first, then steady. And behind me, Alana stood frozen, for the first time, speechless. Alana didn't leave the brunch with Jordan. She stayed behind, cornered by family friends, trying to explain. The story she'd built had crumbled in front of too many witnesses. She'd lost the one thing she couldn't manipulate: credibility. I went home early, not to celebrate, but to prepare, because emotional truth had finally been spoken. Now came the legal truth. I called my attorney the next morning. Her name was Vivienne Cho, and she'd once been Thomas's junior counsel before opening her own firm. She was young, sharp, and meticulous. We had been working together quietly for months. It's time, I said. She didn't ask what I meant. That afternoon, we filed 3 motions to reinstate the original deed of sole ownership based on the notarized clause Thomas had added before his death, to revoke power of access to any joint accounts not explicitly established in writing, to formally notify all financial institutions of suspected elder coercion and false fiduciary representation. I had proof for each. More than enough. Vivienne delivered the documents herself to the county registrar and 2 major banks. 2 days later, I froze the Blake Trust account, the one Alana had used to cover the payment for the fake letter assembly. All funds required my signature again. I hadn't touched that power until now, but now I used it. That evening, Jordan knocked on my door. He didn't come inside at first. He stood on the porch holding the envelope I'd handed him during the brunch. I read all of it, he said quietly, twice. I waited. He looked older, exhausted, and ashamed. I should have asked more questions, he said. But she made everything feel like I was choosing between the 2 of you. And I thought if I didn't defend her, I was betraying my own family. I nodded. But she wasn't family, he added. Not the way I thought. He finally looked at me. You were always the one holding us together. I didn't cry, not yet. Instead, I stepped aside and let him in. We didn't talk much after that, but something had shifted. The next morning, Alana received a notice from Vivienne's office. It was polite, formal, but final. Effective immediately, all property access she had previously exercised under joint occupancy was suspended. Her name was removed from the trust. If she contested, she'd face a formal fraud investigation, documented, time-stamped, and presented in court. She called Jordan first. He didn't answer. Then she called me. I did. I can't believe you'd take it this far, she said. You forged my words, I replied. I curated them. You stole them. There was silence. Jordan won't forgive you, she said eventually. You're wrong, I said. Jordan is remembering who he is, not who you convinced him to become. She hung up, but the echo of her fear lingered. Vivienne filed one final document, a cease and desist order that barred Alana from using my name likeness or journals in any public or private capacity. The damage control had begun. 3 weeks later, I received a certified letter from Alana's lawyer. She would not be contesting the asset transfers. She would be moving out by the end of the month. No apology, just paperwork. Jordan and I sat down 2 days after that and reviewed the terms of the original Will Thomas's words preserved through all of it. I trust Eleanor, he had written, in life and in memory. This house is hers, not just in deed, but in spirit. Jordan stared at the sentence for a long time. I remember him saying that he whispered, I just forgot how much he meant it. We drafted an official transfer to close Alana's access permanently. I signed it. Jordan signed it. Vivian filed it. Final. Complete. A clean legal line drawn through a year of manipulation. Alana left quietly. No dramatic goodbye. No confrontation. Just silence. But not the hollow kind. Not the kind that follows betrayal. This time it was a silence of closure, of reclamation. The house felt lighter. The halls echoed less. And in the living room, I put the peony bushes back in the window. I found a copy of the original blueprint Thomas and I had drawn when we first built the house. He had scribbled little notes in the margins. One read east window, her chair goes here. Sunlight in the morning. I placed my chair there again, facing the garden, facing the light. The first morning after Alana left, I stood at the kitchen window for a long time, holding a cup of tea I had made exactly the way I liked it, strong, with just a touch of milk. The quiet in the house wasn't heavy anymore. It wasn't haunted. It was mine again. Outside, the garden was beginning to wake. I had replanted the peonies. They were small now green shoots peeking through the soil, but they were growing again. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about who would try to tear them out. I was thinking about how to help them bloom. Jordan started visiting again, not every day, not all at once, but steadily. He came over once a week at first, then twice. Then he offered to fix the broken latch on the back window. Then the light in the guest room. He didn't apologize in a speech, but he brought a bouquet of white lilies one day, Thomas's favorite. And then, on a warm Thursday afternoon, he said something that made me cry. "I read all your journals," he said softly. "Not the ones she stole. The real ones. The ones you wrote after Dad passed." I waited. I didn't know he continued. "I didn't know how much pain you carried alone. I didn't want to make you carry it with me," I said. "I would have," he whispered. He hugged me then, tightly, like a son who had almost forgotten what his mother smelled like. We didn't talk about Alana much after that. She moved across the state. She sent him a brief email, cold and clean. No admission. No remorse. Just distance. He didn't respond. He still carried wounds. So did I. But they were healing now. We opened up the attic together one Saturday and pulled down boxes of old photos. He helped me reframe the ones that had been taken off the walls. Together, we put them back up, each frame like a small declaration we are still here. I started attending grief support groups again, not because I was drowning, but because I finally felt safe enough to speak. I told my story one evening to a group of 8 women, all older, all different. One had lost her husband to a car crash, another to Parkinson's. One woman had been abandoned by her adult children. When I told them what had happened to me, the accusations, the forged letters, the betrayal, no one laughed. No one doubted. One woman simply said, "That's the worst part, isn't it? When people take your words and make them something they're not." Yes, that was it. The theft hadn't just been of property. It had been of memory, of language, of voice. But I had it back now. One afternoon, I sat in the garden with a new journal. I opened to the first page and didn't write anything dramatic. I simply wrote, "This story is mine." It was enough. The lawyer Vivian stayed in touch. She helped me establish a protective trust, not just for my home and assets, but for the values I wanted to pass on. One day, when Jordan has children, if he chooses to, I'll leave behind more than just the house. I'll leave a record of who I was, who I am, what I survived, and how I rose, because that's what this was, not revenge, not victory, but reclamation, taking back what had quietly, slowly been erased. Now, as I sit here in the room Thomas built with his own hands, I look out at the peonies. The sun hits just right. The air is warm. I think of the woman I used to be, timid, careful, trusting too easily. And I thank her, because she endured just long enough to become the woman I am now, clear, resilient, undeniable. So if you're watching this, and you've ever been told that your memory isn't trustworthy, that your story isn't yours, that you imagined the harm, let me tell you something. You are not confused. You are not weak. You are not too old to begin again, because starting again is not failure, it's freedom. And freedom, no matter how late it comes, is worth everything.